Hello, this is Alexis May for AI Med, and today I'm excited to be joined by a special guest, Dr. Rizwan Malik. Rizwan, welcome.
Thank you, Alexis, for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Rizwan. It's great to have you with us. Now, Rizwan, this conversation is a follow-up on an article featured by AI Med, amongst many other mainstream media, indeed, about your work with Cure AI to develop and deploy a COVID-19 detection tool. First of all, can you describe how the Bolton and Cure partnership came together?
Sure, that's a really good question. So if we go back a step, what we saw was the devastating effects in COVID that these were having in China and Spain, and in particular in the realms of this conversation in Italy. And what we were determined to do is try and learn lessons from these and try and mitigate them as much as possible. And specifically what we were trying to do was to consider the needs to provide fast and accurate decision making in a critical care setting, because that was such a pressing concern, particularly with the access to ventilators and high dependency beds. And also we had to consider that there would potentially be a reduction in the medical establishment, either due to illness or due to isolation. So what we saw was that throughout the health IT sector, they were very keen to help. And so we have a sort of flurry of AI solutions spun up. And if we go back, that's referenced the article as well, the concept of tools that were produced in a haste. The main issue, of course, was difficulty in understanding the role that they would play in helping. It was all very well having a tool, but what were you going to do with it? But also the quality of it in terms of the training and validation mechanism. And that was the key, really. It's all very well having something which looked cool and probably was very sophisticated in terms of the algorithm that went with it. But if you remove the COVID aspects of it, these wouldn't be things that you felt right to deploy in a clinical setting otherwise. So into this breach, you had Cure AI, who we partnered with, and clearly there were 2-3 others who I think were very much in the same vein as well, who showcased a solution that they deployed in Italy with a specific and clear use case, which actually met one of our concerns, which in this case was progression monitoring. And it was based on the highly regarded TB algorithm, again, something that's been trained in the past on 2.5 million cases, used in multiple sites in the world. And they'd published very clearly what the data was that they'd used to retool the algorithm with reference to COVID. And again, you contrast that with some of these startups who had put algorithms together, but really they'd been predicated on something like 10, 50, or maybe even 100 cases. And you see the differentiation between. So in that regard, it seemed a natural fit. We found something which was robust. It was meeting a need that we thought was a concern to us. And so it really seemed like an ideal partnership, where of course it still had to go through all the appropriate internal scrutiny. So we engaged the medical director, we talked about critical care doctors, had our radiologists, all had input into the proposal that was put to us. And we decided this was something which we wanted to go with further.
Thank you for that background, Rizwan. And so, I mean, during this sort of global health crisis, there's definitely been a trend towards that kind of acceleration of deployment, which is really exciting to see for a lot of people who've been working in and around digital health for a long time. What's your experience been of deployment of this solution thus far?
Well, as you can appreciate, when you take a risk in this regard to take the plunge, we've all been, particularly in the UK and the NHS, we've been very cautious in our general approach to artificial intelligence. And here we've gone from standing to 100 miles an hour, so to speak. So from my point of view, it was actually incredibly reassuring. The risk was to have our head of critical care ring me up and say, "What the heck have you done?" But actually, conversely, we got some very positive feedback from them, talking about how it was facilitating care. And actually, in particular, they were talking about how the AI was helping their junior doctors improve the quality of their chest X-ray reviews as well, which was great. In terms of the actual circumstances of when we deployed and how we went about it, remember, everyone had this heightened sense of the concern of the pandemic itself and doing things at speed. But there was also this excitement of doing something innovative here and being first to it. And this really fueled this energy and synergy between our IT team, Cure's IT team, our PACS manager, and it has to be said, our PACS supplier as well. and they worked incredibly hard together to make sure that we stood up the server, software was deployed onto it, and then there was a very, very intense 3 or 4 days of the testing and validation and making sure that what we'd envisioned was actually what we delivered. We went from the go, no-go to doing everything I've described and being in a position to deploy in just about a week. And I can't, you know, and I think I do need to sort of say at this point that it was humbling just how much effort people put in to make sure that it was working in a safe manner. Obviously, there's always some niggles when you do something new, and again, we're all continuously in dialogue, working through them. But the response to them has been incredibly swift. Probably one good lesson here, which is a broad one as well, is we focus so much on making sure the tech work that probably one thing which, if we had the time all over again, I'd say is don't forget the human factors. Those same junior doctors who I'm talking about are probably the group that we forgot to tell that we'd actually done this in the first place. And it was only when they came, started looking at x-rays and thought, what the heck's going on here, that we had to go back and explain not only what we deployed, why we did it, and how they should use it.
Okay, I mean, that's an incredible turnaround and a really important point in terms of, well, I suppose in terms of implementing anything successfully, is having everybody along for the ride. And it's great that you made that point and underlined it. Our community across the world are always really interested in learning about what works in terms of implementation. Do you have any other sort of key tips for people who are sort of going down this road?
I think so. The first thing is, as you said, increasingly we've gone from consideration of these tools from being niche to ideally we want to promote them increasingly and find the role for them. In that regard, it's probably useful to put a nod towards the guide that the NHSX has just published, which was really a recipe of how to do some due diligence on AI solutions and the kind of things to look out for. It's structured in very much a idiot's guide, so idiots like me can learn from them, that's for sure. I think the main take home I'd say is don't be passive in this relationship. Even someone with a vested interest in this field, I was basically inundated with AI companies wanting to showcase their wares to me, and it's all couched in very seductive language, and you can very easily buy into it. But the first thing is work out what it is that you want to try and address from your point of view. Don't be approached and feel, all right, I've got this, what do I do with it? But I should do it the other way around. Try and find what specific problems either you want to address, or they don't have to be problems. What kind of things do you want to innovate in and engage and make better and more productive? Once you've got that, then try and go out and find solutions which could meet with your needs. And I think when you do this, it's far more clear from the outset what exactly you're going to do with this shiny new toy that you've got to play with. So think of the use case first, and then of course, don't neglect looking at what they're presented to you, the wealth of data, training, and experience that underpins it.
Thanks, Rizwan. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's greatly appreciated. That's all the time we've got for today. But thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And thanks everyone for watching. Please do make sure to like, share, subscribe, and keep an eye out for more AI Med talks at ai-med.io.